Still alive, which is an accomplishment all on its own.
When he arrives,
Hey, hashtag off.
yeah.
Hashtag off.
Right. Wipe out.
Again? Thank you.
Hey, how are you? Good, nice to see you.
Your mic under there. Brought some of my friends here. Good. 100%.
I just have good luck.
This is the first Bell House we had here in a long time.
We're back. Welcome back. I know that, great. Oh, it's like old home week. Oh my God. I remember when I had. You want to sit here?
It's easier than it seems.
It's like my Twitter feed lights up every stupid sick thing. It is a welcome back, buddy.
I miss you around here. Not Letterman. Miss him as much.
Okay.
Usually we don't get to the
Good up. I missed that one. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, I do. It all comes right out of my account. Yeah, right. Before you. Got it. Kevin, you're hot. They're gonna take it. Got it? We haven't done it yet. Thanks, Greg. You're hot too. Sorry. I don't know. You're okay.
My mother said I was in Georgia.
And your mom. Right. Yeah, but my wife could be lying.
I always tell her she looks great.
That wasn't that no. I whispered it for a reason.
I swear our whole life, never pick me up, she'll come in and say, show me the other house. What do you think? How does this work? Ultimately, I'll say, like that. He invariably takes the other one.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you all, including some familiar faces. I do not have any announcements at the top, so we can go straight to your questions. Josh, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Josh. The president described. I should
clarified. President Obama described his meeting with President-elect Donald Trump as excellent. I was wondering if you could tell us if there was anything specific that President-elect Trump told the president about how he plans to govern this country that led to President Obama's characterization of it that way.
Well, Josh, I had an opportunity shortly before coming out here to visit briefly with President Obama about the meeting, and there are many details of their discussions that they'll keep between the two of them. A couple of things that I can share with you. Obviously, the president indicated during the pool spray that they had an opportunity to discuss some foreign policy and some domestic issues. Some of those foreign policy issues came up in the context of the president's upcoming trip overseas. The president described to the president-elect some of the issues that he expects to come up with some of our allies and partners and other world leaders that he'll meet with on the trip. And so it was an opportunity for them to talk about some of those issues in advance of the president's trip and in advance of some of the conversations that he expects to have with world leaders on the trip. There also was an opportunity for the two leaders to talk about staffing and organizing a White House. That's complicated business. And any White House is expected to be structured in a way to deal with multiple challenges or even multiple crises at the same time. And the president-elect indicated a lot of interest in understanding the strategy of staffing and organizing a White House. And obviously that's something that President Obama has thought about extensively during his 8 years in office. And they spent a large portion of the meeting discussing the importance of properly staffing up and organizing a White House operation. But look, other than that, what the president heard from the president-elect is a clear commitment to the kind of effective, smooth transition that President Obama has been vowing to preside over for the better part of a year. And the president tends to make good on that promise in the 70 days ahead.
Did the president leave the meeting any more reassured that President-elect Trump will not try to dismantle all of the work that you and your colleagues have done over the last 8 years? And did President Obama make any pitch to Trump, for instance, not to get rid of Obamacare or other significant policies?
Well, listen, I'm not going to get into all the details of their meeting. I think that President Obama came away from the meeting with renewed confidence in the commitment of the president-elect to engage in an effective, smooth transition. That obviously is what President Obama believes serves the American people the best. We are committed to doing what is required on our part to make sure that that happens, and the president was pleased to hear a similar commitment expressed by the president-elect.
Do you know if the president got any reassurances from Trump about whether he plans to pursue what he discussed during the campaign about trying to incarcerate Hillary Clinton?
Well, listen, I'll let President-elect let the president-elect sort of read out his end of the conversation. But as I mentioned yesterday, the president was found reassuring the kind of tone that the president-elect conveyed in his election night remarks. As I mentioned yesterday, these were remarks that the president-elect delivered not just to his supporters in the ballroom, but to the citizens of the country that were tuned in to this historic election, but also to people around the world. And given the intensity of scrutiny of his remarks, it's notable that he chose that kind of tone. I think we saw a similar tone just in the Oval Office 30 minutes ago, where he was indicating his commitment to working closely with the outgoing administration to ensure a smooth, effective transition. It doesn't mean they agree on all the issues. They obviously have deep disagreements. But what they do agree on is a commitment to a smooth and effective transition, and that's a good thing for the country.
Did President-elect Trump talked about looking forward to receiving President Obama's counsel in the future and meeting more times? Do they agree to meet again? Were there something put in place where they're expected to continue the conversation they had today in an additional format?
I'm not aware of any additional meeting that's been scheduled, but I wouldn't rule out future consultations. Obviously, when President Obama served, over the last 8 years, President Obama has benefited from the kinds of conversations that he's been able to have with previous presidents, and I wasn't surprised to hear that President-elect Trump indicated that he feels like he would benefit from those conversations over the course of his presidency as well. Okay, Roberta.
Was it awkward at all, given all the rancor that the two men exchanged versus each other on the campaign trail, and even before that? Was the meeting awkward at all in terms of getting past that? Was there a moment where they had to sort of break the ice and get past that?
Well, to be as specific as possible about this, Roberta, there was no staff in the room when President Obama and President-elect Trump sat down in the Oval Office for 90 minutes. So I think that's probably a question you'd have to ask the two of them. I feel confident in telling you that they did not resolve all their differences. I also feel confident in telling you they didn't try to resolve all their differences. What they sought to do was to lay the foundation for an effective transition from the Obama presidency to the Trump presidency. And this administration, at the direction of President Obama, has been preparing for this moment and this meeting for the better part of a year. And this obviously was an important early step, having the president sit down with the president-elect to discuss that transition. And based on the kind of agreement that was evident about the priority that they both place on a smooth transition, it sounds like the meeting might have been at least a little less awkward than some might have expected.
And you said that it was just the two of them alone. There was no staff in the room.
That's correct.
For the entire time.
That's correct.
And the pool waiting to go into the Oval had seen some other officials, Dennis McDonough among them, on the South Lawn. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what other officials from the White House may have met with, who was in those sort of discussions and meetings going on at the same time.
I know that the President-elect's spokeswoman, Ms. Hicks, was here. I had an opportunity to meet with her, to meet her, I guess I should say, while the President-elect was meeting with President Obama. You noted that she also had longer meetings with some other members of some of my colleagues in the communications team. You noted that Mr. Kushner was here and had an opportunity to visit with the Chief of Staff. Those are the only two staffers from the President's-elect team that I had an opportunity to meet today. There may have been some others that were with him, but I can't speak to all of the meetings that took place. I will just clarify that there is a more formal process that we would expect would guide the interactions between the President's team and the President-elect's team for the 2 months between now and the inauguration. There will be a formal process for that kind of consultation to ensure a smooth transition. The kinds of conversations today were much more informal in nature.
And President-elect Trump mentioned that he learned about some high-flying assets, and I'm just wondering if you know what he was referring to when he talked about that.
I'm not sure what he was referring to, but you can check with his team on that. Okay, Michelle.
So you're saying as far as excellent goes is talking about a smooth transition and having a good tone. I mean, that's all that excellent means in that.
Well, I think when you consider the profound differences between the two gentlemen, when you consider the fact that they've never met before in person, and when you consider the high priority that the president places on a smooth and effective transition, I think that qualifies as excellent.
And I mean, Donald Trump mentioned that this was originally supposed to only last 10 to 15 minutes. Is that true? And why would it go on so much longer than that?
The president had allotted more time on his schedule for that meeting than just 10 to 15 minutes, but they did end up spending about 90 minutes talking about a range of issues, including what I described to Josh earlier. And I think that would be an indication of a pretty robust, valuable meeting.
So yesterday you talked about the president still having deep concerns, obviously, and that everything he said on the campaign trail about Donald Trump was true. Mm-hmm. This meeting, I mean, considering all of that, it was a brief meeting. Did it do anything to assuage any of those deep concerns?
Well, listen, as I mentioned yesterday, the president campaigned vigorously across the country, making a forceful case in favor of the candidate that he supported. And he did that right up to the night before Election Day. But on Election Day, the ballots were counted, and the American people decided The president was never in a position to choose his successor. The American people chose his successor. The president vowed to work with whomever the American people chose. So, no, they did not recreate some sort of presidential debate in the Oval Office today. They were focused on doing the work of the American people, fulfilling their institutional responsibilities. And on President Obama's part, that means laying the groundwork so that the incoming president-elect can hit the ground running. After all, as President Obama said in the Rose Garden yesterday, we're all rooting for his success when it comes to uniting and leading this country.
So the president still has those deep concerns then, is what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the forceful case that the president made on the campaign trail leading up to Election Day reflected his authentic views about the stakes of the election and about the candidate that he went all in to support.
And so obviously there was nothing in this meeting that would change any of that.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that the meeting was not convened to try to resolve the variety of concerns that President Obama had raised on the campaign trail. The meeting was focused on the transition, and it went well.
Okay, and Leslie, given that some of Trump's advisors have, just prior to this meeting, talked about looking for all of the ways or wanting a list of all of the ways that they could roll President Obama's policies back starting on day one. Does the president fully expect that to happen?
Well, listen, I'm not going to prejudge what their transition process is. Obviously, our goal is to make sure that the incoming president-elect can hit the ground running and can enjoy success when it comes to uniting and leading the country. That's what the president promised yesterday. Convening a meeting in the Oval Office today is part of making good on that promise. How they choose to use the time and what priorities they choose to set for the earliest days of the Trump presidency is something that you'll have to ask them.
What does the president expect to happen, though?
I think the president's expectation is, is that the incoming president will set his own priorities and pursue them accordingly. And again, our goal is to provide them the kind of advice that would give the president-elect and his team the opportunity to succeed in uniting and leading the country. That's what he has indicated that he has made his priority, and we certainly are prepared to do everything we can over the next 71 days to support him in that effort.
Well, does the president now have any reason to believe that Donald Trump is fit to be president of the United States?
Again, I'm not going to, the two men did not relitigate their differences in the Oval Office, and we talked about them quite a bit in here leading up to the election, and we're on to the next phase now. All right, Justin.
You mentioned the formal process, and so I guess I wanted to ask if there are meetings that have either occurred or being set up with senior staff there at the White House since Donald Trump won the presidency, especially national security or economic teams kind of going forward.
My understanding, Justin, is that the broader formal process has not yet commenced with meetings. There were a number of meetings between White House personnel and members of both candidates' transition teams in the months leading up to the election. And I know there have been a number of consultations with the president-elect's team and the White House team. But the formal meetings, I don't believe have started just yet.
I wanted to ask about, I guess, press access to today.
Mm-hmm.
The meeting with the Vice President and Vice President-elect Pence's close press, which is a break from past precedent, and Carol reported that the Obamas canceled a photo op.
That's not true.
Okay. Can you talk about then why we didn't have a photo op in the way that we have in previous administrations, and why there's no press access, and particularly if this is...
Well, first of all, Justin, you just were in the Oval Office with the President of the United States and the President-elect, so it's not accurate to say that there was no press access. But let's just be clear about what's happened. Over the last 8 years, I've enjoyed the opportunity to have many of you in my office over the years advocating for greater access to the President and the work that he's doing in the Oval Office. And what that typically means is you coming in and advocating for the opportunity to see the President of the United States sitting in the Oval Office, photograph him sitting next to the person that he's meeting with, and then hear from both people about the meeting. That's the priority that has been conveyed to me in countless meetings with all of you over the last 8 years. That is exactly what was provided today. That was not provided in 2008. I wasn't part of designing the press access for 2008, so I can't account for all of the reasons for that. But the press access that we put together today was based on the guidance that we've received from all of you over the last 8 years about what the priority is. And we're pleased to be in a position to provide that today. It is an indication of the commitment that we have to transparency, and it's an indication that the President has to building public confidence in the shared commitment to a smooth and effective transition. What better way for the American public to understand that the President-elect and the outgoing President of the United States share a priority of a smooth and effective transition than to allow you all into the Oval Office to hear them talk about their commitment to that effort.
I mean, one way to demonstrate that you guys are committed to that, I guess, effective transfer of power would be to show the Vice President or show the First Lady welcoming their successors into the White House. And so,
but I think we would all just agree that that would be lower in priority than what was provided today. And what was provided today is unprecedented in terms of the kind of access that was granted to previous White House press corps. So look, there's always going to be this back and forth, as I've stated before.
The reason that this is relevant, and the reason that I'm asking the question is, while the President has come out and sort of put on a cherry face, we know obviously many people here are disappointed. First Lady spoke passionately about how she found Donald Trump to be an unacceptable choice. So are we to read anything, or even putting aside whether we should read anything, is the reason that there wasn't press access to either of those events because the First Lady or the Vice President didn't want to be photographed or appear alongside?
Absolutely not. In fact, I'm not aware that the First Lady's office was consulted about the press arrangements for today. I certainly didn't consult with them. What we can do is we can go back to the White House photographer and see if there are any photos from the greet so that you all can get some insight into how that went. So we'll follow up with you on that.
Last one. Number of foreign governments from top allies of the United States, Turkey, the United Kingdom, Canada, Mexico, have all said that their leaders have been in communication with President-elect Trump over the last 24 or 48 hours. Beyond sort of congratulatory calls, is there concern among you guys as you're trying to pursue your foreign policy agenda over the next 2 months while the President's still in power that allies could be getting mixed messages on the United States' foreign policy goals?
I'm not aware of any concern about that. It is not uncommon for countries that have important relationships with the United States for them to call and offer their congratulations to the President-elect. Some of those conversations are facilitated by the State Department. In other cases, you've got foreign governments that are going directly to the President-elect's office, and that's consistent with past practice, and I'm confident that happened in 2008 after President Obama's election as well. Okay, Olivier.
Thanks, Josh. First, I'm kind of curious about the President as HR professional. Does he say you need to get a great chief of staff? Does he say there's this one job you've never ever heard of, but it's vital? How does that, or is it just, obviously Donald Trump knows he's got to staff the White House. So how much precision is the President offering in his recommendation?
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't have a detailed conversation with President Obama about this, but knowing how he has approached these issues himself, I think that he has built an organization at the White House with an eye toward surrounding himself with capable people and putting them in positions where they are given the authority that they need to make decisions. Also, he's ensured that they are given the authority that they need to elevate decisions to him if they need to be. So structuring the organizational chart effectively is not an insignificant matter when you're talking about life and death decisions that have to be made on a regular basis in this building. The president will be taking some questions over the course of the next week, and maybe somebody can see greater insight from him on that.
And then looking overseas to the operations against the Islamic State, the president recently sent 1,700 more American troops there. You've long insisted that they don't have a combat mission. These are combat troops. Mm-hmm. Why did they go? And I mean, are you saying that they need 1,700 more American troops worth of advice and assistance? Mm-hmm. I mean, we're starting to see some social media of Americans who look like they are in frontline operations, not in supportive ones.
Yeah. Olivier, what we've made clear is that our service members, when they go to Iraq, they are trained for combat, they are equipped for combat because they need to defend themselves in a dangerous country. But they are not given a combat mission. And that is an important distinction because the president does not believe that American troops should be in a situation in which they are expected to be at the tip of the spear to go and take and hold ground. The idea of the U.S. military being an occupying force in Iraq is not one that has yielded success for our country. It's not made our country safer. So what the president envisioned and the mission that they have been given is a dangerous one. It's one that in which American service members are asked to assume great risk so that they can be in a position to, in some cases, train Iraqi security forces. In other cases, so that they can offer advice and assistance as Iraqi security forces undertake important military objectives. There are even some situations where if some of those trainers or advisors end up in a dangerous position, then there are additional U.S. forces that are mobilized to get them out. This is dangerous work, and this does put them in harm's way, and it does put them in a situation where occasionally they have to use their combat training and their combat equipment to defend themselves. But that is much different than being in a situation in which they are asked to take and hold territory. That's a different strategy, and it's a different mission. Both of them are dangerous. Both of them require courage and professionalism and skill and sacrifice. And that's what we have seen from our men and women in uniform.
I take your point about occupying, but the kinds of troops you're sending now are actually the kinds of troops that take ground and hold it at least briefly.
Well, again, I recognize that the service members that President Obama has sent to Iraq do have extraordinary combat capabilities. They've got extensive training. They've got the kind of combat equipment that you would see in a theater of war, that you would expect our service members to have when they're operating in a dangerous place. But the mission that they have been given is different than the mission that they were given by President Bush that involved occupying a foreign country. That didn't work out well, and President Obama believes that we need to try a different strategy, and that different strategy is yielding important success. In Iraq alone, we've already taken back more than 50% of the occupied, populated territory that ISIL previously held. Now, with the support of these advisors and trainers and other U.S. forces that are offering assistance, Iraqi security forces have isolated Mosul and are beginning the important, painstaking work of ejecting ISIL from Mosul. So we're making progress based on the strategy that the president has put forward. This is a strategy that requires our service members to assume great personal risk, but it is a strategy that is yielding progress and making America safer. John.
Josh, what is the president's message to the thousands and thousands of people across the country protesting this election, some of them carrying signs saying, "Not my president"?
Well, John, I think the first thing the president would say is that we've got a carefully, constitutionally protected right to free speech. And the president believes that that is a right that should be protected. It is a right that should be exercised without violence. And there are people who are disappointed in the outcome. And the president's message in the Rose Garden was, it's not surprising that people are disappointed in the outcome, but it's important for us to remember a day or two after the election that we're Democrats and Republicans, but we're Americans and patriots first. And that's the message that the president hopes that most people will hear. But are there some people who are going to be disappointed? And are they going to express those views in public? I think we've seen that that's the case. They have constitutional rights to do that, and those rights should be protected. But the president would obviously want them to hear his message as well.
Given all that's been said, were you surprised to see Donald Trump or hear Donald Trump say that the president is a very good man who he respects?
Listen, I think the kind of tone that we heard from the president-elect in the Oval Office today is consistent with the kind of tone that he used in his remarks on election night. And that's the kind of tone that you heard President Obama welcome in the Rose Garden. And it certainly is something that the president was pleased to hear.
He did say he would seek the president's counsel, and there would be many, many more meetings. Is President Obama open to meeting again with President Trump, including after when he becomes President Trump?
Of course. Look, the president has benefited from the kind of consultation that he's had with former presidents, and President Obama is determined, as he mentioned yesterday, to do as much as possible to ensure that President Trump can have some success in uniting and leading this country. We're as President Obama himself said, he's rooting for his success as he takes on the important work of uniting the country after a divisive election and leading our country forward in a way that's consistent with the best interests of many generations of Americans.
And I know you said they didn't relitigate the campaign, but I just want to ask you what the president's thoughts are. He said just on Monday that Donald Trump is temperamentally unfit to be commander-in-chief, uniquely unqualified. Does he still believe that?
Look, the president's views haven't changed. He stands by what he said on the campaign trail. He had an opportunity to make his argument. He made that argument vigorously. He made that argument in states all across the country. But the American people decided. The election is over. The president didn't get to choose his successor. The American people did. And they've chosen President-elect Trump. And President Obama is determined to preside over a transition that gives the incoming president the opportunity to get a running start. Okay, Major.
Pick up on Justin's line of questioning. The president assured President-elect Trump that he would do everything he can to make a swift and sure transition. Did he ask of President-elect Trump to have his backing for anything he may do in foreign policy while he's still president? Get assurances from him that there would be no criticism, either through back channels or publicly, of what he's still trying to accomplish while he retains the powers of the presidency?
I didn't ask the president if he sought that kind of assurance from the president-elect, so I can't say for sure what was discussed in the Oval Office. The thing that I am sure of is that everybody understands that we've got one president at a time, and President Obama is president of the United States until January 20th, and he will exercise the authorities of the office consistent with his view about what's in the best interest of the country. On January 20th, it will be the president-elect's turn to assume that awesome responsibility.
And there's no anxiety on the part of the president that the president-elect doesn't understand or appreciate that?
Well, listen, I think you'd have to talk to the president-elect's team about whether or not he would object to the principle that I've just laid out.
Okay. The Russian government said today that there were contacts between it and the Trump campaign and the Clinton campaign during the course of the campaign. Does the White House find any reason at all be concerned about that, or would that fall into the category of normal embassy communications with two campaigns, one of which may become the next president of the United States?
Well, I can't speak to the nature of those conversations, obviously, so it's hard to judge them in the abstract. I know that.
Considering the conversation that went on during the campaign, does this raise any higher level of anxiety or alarm?
Yeah. Well, listen, it's what I know based on my own personal experience is I know that there were. When President Obama was running for president, that there were occasions where members of his team did consult with representatives of other governments. I don't think there's anything inherently nefarious about that. But again, I can't speak to the content of the conversations that may have occurred. So I don't think I can pass judgment one way or the other. But I don't think there's anything inherently nefarious about it.
The president-elect mentioned that some difficulties on the foreign policy stage were discussed. Did the president go into that meeting wanting to convey anything in particular about what's going on in Mosul, what's going on in Iraq, and perhaps convey some information that the president-elect might either not be aware of or not sufficiently appreciated? Because I don't need to tell you, Josh, in the last 2 weeks, or a lot longer, the president-elect was describing what was going on in Mosul as something approaching an abject disaster, which I know is not your interpretation or the Pentagon's interpretation.
Right.
Did the president feel obligated or go into this one to say, well, here's some stuff you might want to know because you're going to inherit where this is come January 20th?
Well, the president did feel obligated to touch on some important foreign policy priorities, and I know that the ongoing campaign against ISIL in Iraq and in Syria, for that matter, are important foreign policy priorities. I don't know to what extent that was discussed, but this is obviously something that President Obama is following closely.
Thanks, Josh.
Okay. Ron.
You said that the president stands by everything that he said on the campaign trail about Donald Trump.
That's right.
Then the president must be very concerned about the future of the country.
Well, listen, the president right now is concerned on the most important institutional priority that he has right now, which is presiding over a smooth and effective transition.
But again, if he still feels this way about the president-elect, he must be concerned about the future of the country beyond this transition.
Look, Ron, the president had an opportunity to make a very forceful case in public in states all across the country in support of the candidate that he endorsed. The American people chose someone else, and he's committed to working with that person, the person that he did not support, to ensure a smooth and effective transition. There is a long tradition in our democracy of presidents effectively doing that because they have a responsibility to put their own political views aside and perform the functions of the presidency. And one of those functions is to ensure a peaceful, smooth, and effective transition because America is going to do its best when its presidents are performing at its best. And President Obama is determined to do everything that he can to allow the president-elect and his team to hit the ground running.
I think we understand that, but the question is, after the transition, what does the president intend to do? Is he going to become something of an opposition figure? He's got to be concerned about the direction that the president-elect has said he's going to take the country.
Well, I think as all of you have heard, the president's plans to take a long vacation after he leaves office have not changed, and I assure you that he's looking forward to that as much as ever. But you know, over the longer term, you know, I don't have any commitments to make on the part of the president. One thing that I can share with you is something that I've heard him say. I know in private, I assume that he said this in public too, which is just the idea that he deeply appreciated how President George W. Bush, after leaving office, gave the new president some running room, gave him a little space. It wasn't backseat driving in public, offering up all kinds of critiques with every single decision that President Obama was making in the earliest days of his presidency. I'm confident that President George W. Bush didn't agree with every single decision that President Obama was making, but he was extraordinarily respectful of the democratic process. President Obama admired that. But look, I can't make any promises now for what exactly President Obama will do once he leaves office.
During the next 70 some odd days, is there a strategy that the White House has, the president has, to try and preserve and protect certain aspects of his of what he has accomplished here? Is there what are the priorities?
Well, I think the first priority is ensuring the smooth and effective transition, but there's also the priority that the president places on making sure, as the chief of staff likes to say, that we run through the tape, that the president and his team use every moment that's remaining to do the work of the American people and to effectively implement the kinds of policies that President Obama has prioritized over the course of his presidency.
And what are some of those priorities now, given the change of administration, given the fact that Donald Trump has won the presidency? What specifically is the focus? What are the priorities?
Well, I don't know that I can give a comprehensive list, but some of the priorities that come to mind are the kinds of priorities that actually would be in place regardless of the outcome of the election. Whether or not Mr. Trump had emerged victorious from the election, we would be focused on the implementation of the Affordable Care Act and maximizing the opportunity that currently is available to millions of Americans to go to healthcare.gov during the open enrollment period and sign up for healthcare. For those individuals that already have healthcare, they have an opportunity to go to healthcare.gov and shop around. Many of them will find that there actually is a comparable healthcare plan available that will cost them less money. So making that a priority is something that we would do regardless of who had won the election, but that certainly is a very high priority right now. Obviously, when it comes to counterterrorism and homeland security, that's always a priority. That was true before the election, and that certainly is true after the election. And we certainly wouldn't want any of our adversaries to be confused about the fact that America might somehow be uniquely vulnerable in the midst of this transition. That's not true. This administration is strong, and our homeland security efforts are as vigorous as they've ever been. And we're going to continue that effort. You made reference, or someone made reference to, a major made reference to the ongoing work against ISIL in Iraq and in Syria. The United States is leading a coalition with 67 partners to degrade and ultimately destroy that terrorist organization. There are some consequential decisions that have been made recently by leaders on the ground, both in Iraq and in Syria, to focus on the minimize the likelihood that we'll achieve that objective. Okay, Carol.
Donald Trump's advisor on Israel said today that the president-elect doesn't view settlements as an obstacle to peace, which is obviously a different position than the president has. And the president had been looking at perhaps doing something on this issue before he leaves office, just to put it in a different place than it is now, on a trajectory to eventually the next president to be able to have talks. Is he considering doing something like that still, or is he of the view that at this point, when you have a president-elect, taking steps like that, when you have such big, wide disagreements, is not the proper thing to do?
Yeah. Well, my first reaction is that the concern that you've heard President Obama express about the expansion of settlements is not just the policy of this administration. It was actually the policy of previous Democratic and Republican administrations who expressed concerns about that. The view is that trying to change facts on the ground only puts a negotiated settlement, a resolution of differences between the two parties, farther away. So the president views that kind of continued settlement expansion as counterproductive. And again, that's consistent with the policy that Democratic and Republican presidents have expressed. More generally, I don't have anything to preview with regard to any additional steps that President Obama may consider before leaving office. The principle that we have articulated is that it is really important for the Israelis and Palestinians to sit down in the context of face-to-face negotiations and resolve their differences. And President Obama has expended enormous effort. Secretary Kerry has probably expended more effort than anybody else to try to bring those sides together. And thus far, those efforts have not yielded the kind of progress that we'd like to see. But our belief that that's the only way that those differences will be resolved is, continues to be true.
What about the broader, does the president have a philosophy on just that issue when you have a president and a president-elect who differ so much on significant foreign policy issues? Does he believe that it's the time to not take steps that would be at odds with what the next president?
That authority rests solely with President Obama until January 20th. April.
Josh, a couple of questions. One, did you get any kind of readout from the First Lady's office about her meeting with the soon-to-be First Lady Melania Trump?
Mm-hmm.